The Forum 2, exclusively on YouTube Live, weekdays from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. We tackle the tough issues: political, social, cultural, and racial. It may not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. Check out our website, theforum2.com. Call in live, 414-395-0484. Check us out. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Monday, November 16th, 2020. You guys know that the coronavirus is ravaging this country. And I think it is high time for a discussion on what we plan to do about that. And I have listened to an awful lot of concerns from people that don't want to take the vaccine. Now, a second company has come out with a vaccine that is 94.5% effective. Moderna is touting the effectiveness of their vaccine, keeping in mind that when a company says their vaccine has a level of effectiveness, that includes the side effects that people think may kill them. The long-lasting effects of this administration are going to take some time to undo. In fact, some of them may never get outdone. But if we look back to the election, which in one form or another is still going on, after the canvass results are submitted, I believe, this Friday for Milwaukee County, the Trump administration is still trying to cling to a completely unreachable victory. It's going to order a recount of the election. And what needs to be made clear, because there's so much happening. There's so many things that are coming at us. The world is changing, but at the same time, it's staying the same. And there's just so many things to try and decipher. When are we going to get back to normal? What does normal look like? The holidays are coming up. Some of y'all are already putting up your Christmas trees, and God bless you if you believe that the holidays are going to bring you some sense of normalcy. Fair enough. Do what you got to do in these unusual times. Donald Trump is trying to prolong the inevitable. He also, for the first time, posted a tweet that gave some semblance of his understanding that he lost the election, but then that tweet was removed and he had another one that said, no, I won the election, it was rigged. I posted a couple of them in the Forum Facebook group. What Donald Trump is doing is he is testing the strength of his supporters. What will they say? How will they react if he says, you know what, guys, we tried really hard. We had 4 years and we lost the election. Donald Trump wants to see where his followers are going to be, because his plan is to take this new cohort of Americans with him into whatever his next endeavor is, including seeking the Republican nomination in 2024. As ridiculous as that may sound, what really is ridiculous anyway nowadays in America, in the world? And so what he is doing now, failing to concede, and more dangerously than failing to concede, is not working with the Biden administration, the incoming Biden administration, on a transition during a pandemic that has now been considered. This is in America now, not just worldwide. And yes, cases are spiking in other countries. And for those of you that want to look at, there's cases that are spiking in Europe, well, then go to Europe then. If you're going to use that as some kind of comparison to make it okay or something that we need to tolerate here in the United States of America, well, cases are going up all over the place, meaning that there's idiots that fell in love with a fascist in Europe too. So let's not use that as a comparison. But the humanitarian crisis that this virus is reaching or causing in this country is going to mean at some point in time, other countries are going to have to send support to the United States, because we are killing ourselves with ignorance, with stupidity, with this facade of liberty, because people still don't want to wear a mask. It's just, I would say it's amazing, but it isn't. It's not amazing. There are such stark views on the coronavirus and its effects. We saw that in the presidential election, which is technically still going on. It is why the Biden campaign was almost incessant in how they talked about the things they were going to do to stop the virus, including connecting the economy or lack thereof to getting the virus under control. And I would argue that that strategy worked with a majority of the voters, not necessarily a majority of the people. Another misnomer that we have is that half the country voted for Donald Trump. No, half the country did not. 20% of the country at best voted for Donald Trump, 47% of the voters. So he did not get a majority anywhere. There are smaller areas, smaller states, and smaller congressional districts in which Donald Trump did get a majority, but the majority of the people in this nation thoroughly rejected what he was selling, essentially all of what he was selling. But the strongest point, and ultimately the one that I believe played the biggest role in getting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris 306 electoral votes, was their focus on getting the coronavirus under control. As the sun is starting to set on the year 2020, and we look forward to a new horizon in the year 2021, there are some things that I think we should leave in the year 2020. And it's this unwillingness to believe science. And I guess I understand, because of the way the Trump administration talked about the coronavirus and how Donald Trump said that he was going to use the American military to distribute the vaccine. And so anything that he says has diminished credibility. But when critical thinking folks that up until this point believed in science, believed in medicine and medical technology, or at the very least, we believed in the greed of corporate America to come up with a vaccine that they could get rich off of, because they're going to be selling the vaccine to the government. The federal government will likely be the biggest client of Moderna, of Pfizer, and other companies that come up with this vaccine. And personally, I don't think that there is some conspiracy to kill everybody. I really don't believe that. But that's a part of the grip that Donald Trump has had, even on critically thinking, Democrat voting, educated people in this country. Because the first conversations about the vaccine came from the Trump administration, people just don't believe it. They think that Donald Trump was in the laboratory creating the vaccine. But what he is doing, here's what he did have a hand in. He didn't have a hand in, and there are some companies that took no resources whatsoever from the federal government. If you're going to do your research on that. So Donald Trump had no hand in the creation and the formulation of this vaccine. But what he is doing is he's prolonging the bleeding for America. He hasn't been to a coronavirus briefing in 5 months. They all but disbanded the entire team. Anthony Fauci is probably going to get fired if he hasn't been already. The lack of attention being paid to the vaccine or to the coronavirus, and then the lack of cooperation between coordinating with the incoming Biden administration means Donald Trump knows that as time goes on, more people are going to get sick, more people are going to die, more people are going to think it's fake, more people are going to believe it's a hoax. 1,000 people are dying every single day. We are still hitting coronavirus records into this country just as bad as any other country in the world. And we have the vaccine. He wants to punish this country for not voting for him. And every person that says, well, I'm not going to take the vaccine, or I'm going to wait a couple of years to see what happens, you are falling under this spell that this man has cast on this country. I shouldn't call it a spell. I should call it a curse. I'm sure when they came up with the polio vaccine, a bunch of people were like, I think I'm going to sit this one out and just see what happens. And then they sat it out because they didn't believe the polio vaccine, or they thought the polio vaccine was going to kill them. And those people are no longer around to complain about waiting to see what happens with the polio vaccine, because they're all dead because they got polio. That's how that kind of works. The psychological grip that the trauma that he has inflicted on this nation, let me call it what it is, should not affect people that voted for the science and medical technology that can get us out of this mess. And I'm just seeing way too much of it, which means that we're going to be shuttered at home, and 1,000 or 2,000, or I don't know what the number has to be of American deaths every single day before people say, you know what, maybe we should consider doing something that can potentially save our lives. And maybe it's because as a child, I had asthma and I know what it's like not to be able to breathe. It is torture. Worst fear for me is getting sick and having to be on a ventilator. and having to say goodbye to my family via FaceTime. And like that actually scares me. I'm really worried about that because from, previously, I guess up until this point, I was just washing my hands and going out in public as little as possible and wearing a mask and doing all that other stuff. And I found a way to adapt to what the new world is, but we shouldn't have to do that, especially if we're going to be stuck in this new world because of people's resistance to science and technology and a vaccine that has proven effective. Did it happen very quickly? Did they come up with a formulation for the vaccine quickly? They did. Did they have to? They did. We didn't have 5 years to wait. You guys realistically think that some children that are starting eighth grade this year would be okay, and the parents would be okay homeschooling those children through high school and then having them graduate while being homeschooled because people wanted to wait on the effectiveness of the vaccine? We don't have that kind of time to wait. And I think as these cases continue to mount and it gets closer and closer to home for some folks that thought it wasn't real, that think it's a hoax, that think it's just like the flu, pretty soon we won't have those individuals to worry about. And I don't want us to get to that point because of this cloud of ignorance that Donald Trump has cast over this nation. You have people that otherwise would believe in medicine and science and technology refusing to do so. We are turning people who are pro-vaccine into anti-vaxxers. And I get it. Some people have had vaccines before, or you don't like shots and you've had adverse reactions in the past. I understand. But this is one of those risks we're probably just going to have to take because this is unsustainable. This is not something that's going to pass. If you believe that if we can just wait a little bit longer and keep washing our hands and keep wearing masks, then when Donald Trump said it was going to disappear like a miracle by Easter, last Easter, then you're falling into that mode of thinking. And I would say that mode of thinking is what lost the election. There was a slim majority of people, and I say a slim majority because the popular vote lead that Joe Biden got over Donald Trump will maybe be 6 million. That's a slim lead, but it was that difference that is trying to promote not just decency, not just racial equity, not just social justice, not just economic fairness, but getting people a vaccine so we can go on and live normal lives again. Because the more people that are resistant to that, resistant to wanting to get the vaccine, the longer we're going to be running in place, or should I say, dying in place. Good morning, everybody. Tammy Reed, good morning. Don't disturb this groove. I have to have my intro music in the morning, Tammy. G. Collins, good morning to you. Blessed says good morning. Gail Williams, glad you're with us. She's got her 2 cups of coffee. Curtis Cook, good morning. Dorian Higgins, good morning, my brother. I'm in favor of another lockdown. I'm also okay with a vaccine as long as it's not supported by the Trump administration. Let's just go ahead and call the Trump administration up until this point non-existent. He is trying to maintain a narrative that is catering to his supporters, who I'm going to say at this point are fascists. And that's just what they are. And they need to go down in history as such. The Trump administration, if it was up to them, Joe Biden wouldn't become president. The coronavirus would still be a hoax, and more people would die. And I say that because in the middle of the pandemic, and I would argue something that has made it dramatically worse is the fact that he had all of these rallies, including people that attended his rallies are dead. 70,000 cases that we can trace directly to people that attended his rallies. He doesn't care. And so because he has occupied that space of not caring and not enforcing social distancing and even making masks optional at some of his rallies, I don't think he had much of anything to do with the coronavirus vaccine, because if he did, he would tell his supporters to take it. If Donald Trump had any input whatsoever, or if he even believed the seriousness of the coronavirus, and why I say that, I'm qualifying all this by saying that he never got the coronavirus in the first place. I want people to understand that. His whole thing was orchestrated. The entire thing, his whole presidency has been a charade on the American people, and we lapped it up because we're just so accustomed to wanting to believe the president of the United States. I don't know what it is about us. We want to believe him. Most of the time we don't, but something deep inside says we kind of want to believe this guy because, he's the president. He gets information that we don't get. He gets briefings that we don't get. He's exposed to information that we don't get. He would be promoting the vaccine. And here's the other thing, why wouldn't he have a financial stake in it? Because part of the reason why some of y'all voted for Donald Trump is because he's a businessman. He wants to punish this country. He's protected by the Secret Service. He never got the coronavirus because if you look at the duties and obligations of the U.S. Secret Service, is to protect the life of the president, not from an assassin, not just from an assassin, but from anything that can harm him, including the coronavirus. And so what he was able to do, because all of the people that surrounded themselves with him, especially toward the end, and I'm going to say the last year and a half of his presidency, because he fired a lot of people. He got rid of all sorts of folks that proved to be more loyal to the Constitution or proved to be more loyal to the American people or proved to be more loyal to the democracy than loyal to Donald Trump. So he got rid of all those people. And so what he had at the very end, once he sifted through all of these people, he had these loyalists that would protect him if one of those loyalists in his administration said, let's give America a hoax. Let's pretend the president got the coronavirus and then recovered from it miraculously. He was like 3 days or something. Somebody who's got every, health indicator that would say Donald Trump would be in the hospital or would have prolonged symptoms. There are some people that have had coronavirus or COVID-19 symptoms for months. And he's back on the campaign trail in 4 days? You really think that a 74, 75-year-old morbidly obese man that does not exercise and does not eat well recovered from the coronavirus miraculously? And if you believe that, okay, so maybe you believe he actually got it. I don't think he got it. I think the Secret Service had a protocol to protect the president, knowing the president's schedule, knowing his lifestyle. They put in additional protocols because the president can't die on the Secret Service's watch because that looks really bad for the agency that literally has 2 responsibilities on the planet, only 2. 1 is protect the president. 2, to stop counterfeit money. That's all the Secret Service does. They don't do anything else. They might do like some cybersecurity stuff. Nah, not really. But that's all they do. Make sure the president doesn't die from all of the things that can kill him, and to stop counterfeit money. And so there were additional protocols I know that they put in place to make sure Donald Trump didn't get the coronavirus. And he never got it because that would be a failure on their part because their responsibility is to protect the commander in chief. But if he could get it, recover, he then would communicate to the nation that it's no big deal, still come to my rallies because the coronavirus is nothing. And we bought it. Either you believe that maybe he did get it. And there's people that say, no, he probably got it. But then if that's the case, you also believe the medical treatment he got so he could recover in essentially a weekend. Which one is it? Either he didn't get it, which I'm in that camp, that he didn't get it at all, or the medical advancements exist to where you could potentially recover from it in 72 hours or 96 hours or whatever it was. He wasn't down for very long. Now, if you believe the latter, and then there was the conversation about, well, Donald Trump is the president and he has access to all sorts of, medicines and all sorts of things that the American people don't have access to. You are correct. But there's only a matter of time before the things that are reserved for the very, very top are filtered down to the bottom. And so if the technology, the medical technology and the bioscience and the chemistry exists for some kind of drug cocktail to have Donald Trump, the president of the United States, recover in 72 or 96 hours, then that means if we had a vaccine, it could encompass some of those elements, most of which are probably not patented, that could be used in other vaccines, because the ingredients in these different vaccines are likely going to be very, very similar. No one is going to have proprietary use over all of the things that are in whatever's in the vaccine. So if you believe that he got it and he recovered, then you believe that there is medical technology and science that could be effective in a vaccine, yet people are refusing to take the vaccine. We gotta pick a direction here. And I'd like to think that the country picked a direction by voting the way they voted on November 3rd. Tutu Reeves says, good morning. Lemon Harris, Another morning has arrived in AD 45 after Donnie 45. So long pace while Trump is golfing and still wants to be president. Yeah, he never really wanted the job of protecting the country. I think there's some upside to him. I think the upside to him being president is what he does afterwards, whether it be a kingmaker for the GOP, because for the foreseeable future, Donald Trump is going to control which Republicans get elected. His involvement in the U.S. Senate runoffs in Georgia will be very telling. He did get, what's Donald's vote total up to? He's got 72 million votes. That's a lot. Considering in some congressional districts, all you need is 50 or 60, maybe 70,000 votes, and there are 70 plus million people nationwide that voted for Donald Trump, meaning in some congressional districts, people voted for Donald Trump by a 20 or 30 point margin. He is still going to be a very effective campaigner for the Republicans and keeping his poisonous legacy alive, because the number of votes that he got tells us that. We have to look at the U.S. Senate runoffs in Georgia as the next most important election in our lifetimes. The presidential election is mostly behind us, meaning that there is no mathematical pathway in which Donald Trump can overturn Joe Biden's 36 additional electoral votes that Joe Biden got to seal the deal. So that's not mathematically possible. But for the Democrats to really enact reforms and to undo some of the things that Donald Trump did, it is going to take a Democratic U.S. Senate. Now, let's be clear. We only have 2 years because the Republicans are going to come up with some kind of strategy to clean sweep the midterm elections in 2022. So we can argue amongst ourselves, but only for a little while, because once the midterm elections come up in 2022, there will be a resurgence of the Republican Party, the likes of which we have never seen. And it's hard to get people focused on that because we're still in the middle of the 2020 presidential election. But if the Democrats can get a majority in the U.S. Senate just for 2 years, because think of the monumental policy things that Democrats can do with a majority for a slim amount of time. Republicans can have the majority for a very long time and can barely move a policy needle at all because their focus is different than Democrats. Because Democrats make so many promises at so many different levels of government and focus on so many different pieces of American misery, it's hard to get all of that stuff done. But if you give the Democrats a majority just for 2 years, a full majority in government, super majority, where they have the executive branch, the legislative branch, well, we guess we can't count the judicial branch because that's lost for at least another 10 years. Let me give you an idea of how durable a Democratic policy can be when we have legislative and executive majorities. Obamacare. I would argue that Barack Obama expended just about all of his political capital, that currency that he had, to get something done on the Affordable Care Act. And based upon statements that were made by sitting Supreme Court justices, they're going to leave the law alone. All the Democrats had was a speaker's gavel in Nancy Pelosi's hand. And then who was the Democratic leader of Harry Reid was the Democratic leader of the Senate. So you had Harry Reid on the Senate side, you had Nancy Pelosi, and you had Barack Obama. They crafted the Affordable Care Act that has lasted 10 years, a whole decade of Republican attacks from every single level, from the state level to the federal level. And now with a conservative Supreme Court, a 6-3 conservative majority, Obamacare still stands. Now, for us to get to that point where Democrats can make some durable changes to begin to reverse course of this nation, we have to win the 2 Senate runoffs in Georgia. It is a long shot, but Donald Trump getting elected in 2016 was a long shot too. We're only going to have that majority if we get it for 2 years, because the midterm elections are not going to be anything kind to Democrats, including here in the state of Wisconsin, so our legislative districts are gerrymandered at this point beyond reproach. We could pick up some seats potentially, but that's a long shot as well. But we're going to lose the governor's office. I just want you to know that in the state of Wisconsin, Tony Evers will not get reelected. I don't even think Tony Evers is going to run for reelection, because I believe that he set his best foot forward in the office to do the right thing all of the time. But I don't know if Tony Evers, it's not in his DNA to be a political cutthroat like we need facing off with these Republicans in the state legislature. I'm talking the first piece of legislation that Republicans in the state Senate and the state Assembly wanted to enact was to take away powers from Governor Evers that they willingly and freely gave to Scott Walker. Tony Evers was not ready for that. And most people wouldn't be. The other thing about the coronavirus pandemic, it's taught us a lot about how destructive the disease can be, but it also taught us about some of our leaders. Some of our leaders, when they were running for office, were not ready for a calamity like this. They weren't battle tested, and some of them weathered the storm quite well, and some of them even emerged as leaders. Even state leaders have emerged as national figures because they were built for moments like these. But most other people that were elected in good times, when the economy was great and things were going wonderful, they weren't ready for this tragedy that we're dealing with right now. I would argue that Andrew Cuomo was one of those people that took on the challenge of the role of the new leader during a pandemic better than anybody else. In fact, Democratic governors as a whole, save for ours and a few others, did the best they could. But I think Andrew Cuomo is a perfect example of someone who was elected in way different economic and social times. But then when this tragedy presented itself, because New York was just dying. You guys remember the early days of the Rona? And like the numbers that we saw was just New York, because New York was just being ravaged, and they got it under control. They put together some really strict measures, but what New York did is communicated to not just this country, but the rest of the world. There are things that we can do, hold on, wait for it, to mitigate, stop, and slow the spread, wait for it, until we get a vaccine. Now we have a vaccine, and now people don't want to take the vaccine. It's like, we did all that for nothing? We didn't stay locked in the house for an entire year for nothing, guys. We stayed locked down until we can get a vaccine. Now we got a vaccine, and people are giving excuses why they won't take the vaccine. Donald Trump gets the coronavirus, or maybe he doesn't, but then he recovers in 72 hours or 96 hours and goes back out there and starts rallying again. Whatever went into the cocktail of the drug that he took, if you believe that he got the coronavirus, and some of you believe that, there's probably something in whatever it is that he took, if you believe he got the coronavirus, that will probably be a part of this vaccine. So if the president can recover from the disease itself in 4 days, then why wouldn't we have a level of faith in at least the greed of corporate America to come up with a vaccine to where they're going to get rich? I don't know. I guess we got to choose. Douglas Dickerson said, all about the money from the vaccines. Of course it is. I mean, it's saving of the American economy, because that can prove to be of tremendous value to all of us as well. Some of you guys are not going back to work. And the longer that we are locked down, the less the likelihood your old job is going to be there. And so if somebody makes money off of getting us back to normal, that's like, no one should do it for free, I mean, it would be nice if Pfizer and Moderna and GlaxoSmithKline came up with a vaccine for free. That'd be great. That'd be really nice of them to do so. But if you're going to save countless lives and put coronavirus behind us, then, I mean, you make a little bit of money. The other thing is, it's probably going to be free, right? So if they make money off of the vaccine, we're going to pay for it one way or another. But I think the highest price that Americans will pay is when people refuse to take it, right? When you refuse to go and get the vaccine. Because if the test is free, like, nobody gets charged for a Rona test, do they? No, they don't. It's free. The vaccine is going to be free. So if somebody else is going to make money off of a vaccine that we can take, they can prevent us from dying from stuff in the air, and it didn't cost us anything to get the vaccine, then I don't know. David Boxhorn, good morning. Betty Thompson, good morning. Sandy J, good morning. Renee Lewis, good morning. TJ Smith Jr., good morning, Cuzzo. Mary Brown, good morning, Sherwin and all. So many folks out here with the Rona. I don't know why I laugh every time I read the Rona. We just shortened it. So many folks out here with the Rona at my workplace. Frightening. I've been arguing for testing here, but management is resisting, saying they're following Evers' mandates. Not enough, we take a risk coming to work every day. A lot of people are at risk. And you gotta, well, how many states are locked down again? We're headed toward that, except I think we have something headed to the court here in Wisconsin this week where they're going to decide if they're splitting hairs at this point. How many emergency orders to lock down can Tony Evers issue? Can he issue just one and then that's it forever? So for the 4 years that he is governor, he only gets one mandatory executive power lockdown order? Or does he get one lockdown order per calamity? And so then they have to figure out if the first surge of the coronavirus was the first calamity, then the next surge, because you all went to Applebee's and went out for a Memorial Day and the 4th of July, and then we got that surge. And then we have this surge because in cold weather climates, things like the flu and other viruses are even further exacerbated. So is this the third wave of the coronavirus? And if it's the third wave, when Tony Evers issued his first stay-at-home order, which was, I don't even remember, is that all? Like, how many emergency orders can Tony Evers get? That is what the state Supreme Court is deciding. Does he get just one, or does he get one per surge of the coronavirus? And if he gets one per surge, have we had 3 surges of the coronavirus, or is it just one big long surge? That's what they're going to decide on. Which kind of doesn't matter if half of the people are not going to get the vaccine when it becomes available, a free vaccine. I don't know. Sarah Laguerre, good morning. Gregory Boswell, good morning to you as well. From CNN, Trump's failure to work with Biden is becoming more urgent as COVID spreads. President Donald Trump is facing a barrage of calls to permit potentially life-saving transition talks between his health officials and incoming President-elect Joe Biden's aides on a fast worsening pandemic he is continuing to ignore in his obsessive effort to discredit an election that he clearly lost. The increasingly urgent pleas are coming from inside his administration, the president-elect's team, and independent public health experts as COVID-19 cases rage out of control countrywide, claiming more than 1,000 U.S. lives per day. More than 246,000 Americans have now died from the disease, and a bitter winter lies ahead, even amid encouraging news, such as today's announcement that a vaccine developed by Moderna is demonstrating a high success rate in early clinical trials, the second such positive vaccine news in about a week. But instead of listening or mobilizing to tackle what some medical experts warn is becoming a humanitarian crisis, Trump spent the weekend during which the U.S. passed 11 million infections, amplifying lies and information about his election loss. At one point, he appeared to acknowledge on Sunday in a tweet that Biden won before backtracking with a stream of defiance on Twitter. This came as the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, said on CNN's State of the Union Sunday that, of course, it would be better if we could start working with the Biden team that will take office on January 20th. So the longer Trump continues to ignore and be resistant to working with the Biden team is more punishment for this country. And Donald Trump is setting out to punish all of us because we didn't vote for him. And if he has to use the coronavirus pandemic as punishment to all of us, he will do it. That is not out of his realm of possibility. I also kind of want to have a conversation about Melania and like how she has become this, damsel in distress and all of this, and that she's going to leave him. She's not going to stay with Donald Trump. I posted something on Facebook to that effect, and just the number of people that are so convinced that she is going to leave him. And maybe she does, right? But she won't leave him because of how he treated us. She won't leave him because he reinvigorated fascism in America. That's not why she would leave. She would leave because of how Donald Trump treated her. Remember when she went to the border and she wore that jacket? You know what the First Lady wears is her statement to the world. because first ladies are mostly symbolic. They don't make policy. They get behind an issue or a cause. With Michelle Obama, it was veterans and veterans families. With Laura Bush, it was reading and it was literacy. Like they have these issues. Nancy Reagan, I remember hers was just say no to crack, while people were saying yes to crack. So first ladies have their issue. And Melania, as ironic as this was anti-bullying. But everything that they do, and in the rare moments in which they do address the public, I think Michelle Obama addressed the public, more than other modern first ladies. But Melania didn't really address the public all that often, and mostly because if she did, it was something plagiarized, that they stole from Michelle Obama, or because Melania she just doesn't know English. She's been in this country like 25 years and just has not. She just doesn't know English. You can come at me if you want, but Melania's English is horrible. So she doesn't really speak much. But when she does do things or say things, it's very symbolic because it speaks volumes about where she's at, what she thinks, what she believes. When she wore that jacket to the border to visit the border camps, I really don't care. Do you remember the jacket? And y'all had a fit about it? Y'all real mad at Melania? She was telling you symbolically, not even symbolically, she was telling you literally how she felt about migrant children being caged at the border and with families being separated. But now all of a sudden, Melania is free and she's going to leave. And for all of you that believe that, she's just as bad as him. But then it also sparked a much deeper discussion because it is kind of curious how a woman who refused to kiss her husband or hold his hand, you never even saw them embrace. Are there even any pictures of the two of the first couple? It even sounds weird to say that Donald Trump and Melania Trump are the first couple. Did they even dance at the inauguration? Because at the inauguration, you have the president and the first lady, and they dance together. Did they even dance? So you have to wonder why she would stay with a man like that. And there's probably a transactional bit to their relationship, which explains why she has stayed as long as she has, because how embarrassing is it for her for Donald Trump to have to pay off porn stars and whatever, that's fine. But to all of a sudden have a level of sympathy for her that she didn't know what she was getting into, and Donald Trump is a bad man and Melania is going to be a strong, independent woman. Stop. Because we are going to have the conversation about white women who have worked just as hard, if not harder, because they almost have more to prove because they're still marginalized because they're women, but the whiteness and the culture behind whiteness has protected them, meaning that white women, including Melania Trump, benefit way more from white supremacy than they do from feminism. The feminist in Melania Trump, if it existed, would say, screw you, Donald, I'm leaving. I'm leaving today. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed women. You are a stain on the institution of marriage and commitment. You're bad for your son. You're bad for the other children in this country. And by me, Melania Trump, leaving you, I'm putting my foot down. I'm making a firm statement. And the other thing is this: if Melania Trump left Donald Trump, assuming there's no prenup, and there is a prenup, she would be independent, not only financially, but sexually too. You know that they don't sleep together, right? You know that. But a bunch of married people don't sleep together. Like they tell the world that they sleep together. They don't. Married people, I'm not going to get into that because y'all have a fit. She's just as bad as him, but we refuse to believe it because we pretend that white women are damsels in distress and they're taken against their will and they need help. And Melania, if you need out, just wink. If you need us to come save you, all these little things that people have been saying because we believe that Melania Trump was not also a fascist and also a white supremacist, who actually consequently is from Eastern Europe where fascism lived and breathed through most of the 20th century. Interesting how that works. But we can't believe that she's a fascist even though she married one. But it's a much larger conversation that we need to have, especially if we're going to take social justice seriously. And I don't know if we're ready to do that. I'm not sure. Melania Trump is not innocent in all of this, and she is just as much responsible for her actions and her behavior by staying in that marriage and staying with that man. She's almost promoting it, is she not? But maybe that's a conversation for another day. Maybe. Eileen Seeger, good morning. Liz Fox Okie, good morning. Who else we got saying good morning? Dorian Higgins, people really believe Melania is leaving are crazy. I mean, maybe she does. I don't know, but that would be the most damaging thing to Donald Trump's brand until he got married again, because the man can find a new wife. Like, that's never been difficult for him. But to let her off the hook or to think that she has been innocent in all of this is problematic for me, but it also sheds light on something that we don't discuss, because we gave a lot of credit to white suburban women that didn't vote for Donald Trump, but mysteriously voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And when I saw the women's march they did shortly after the election of 2016, where you had a bunch of women, remember, this was originally created by African-American organizers in different cities, but white women took the lead of these women's marches. Please don't forget that white women stole the organizing efforts from Black women and women of color that put together those women's marches after Donald Trump was elected. White women were hiding. And I'm not using this as a blanket term. I mean, the culture of whiteness that white women feel shielded by. Not all white women, of course. I got to make sure I clarify, because someone will interpret my words as such. White women benefit more from white supremacy than they do from feminism, intersectional feminism more specifically. Meaning that white women, if they band together with Latinas, if they band together with Asian women, if they band together with Black women, have a limited sphere of power. But if white women say, you know what, I'm white first, a woman second, let me get some of this white supremacy that guarantees me some comfort, some safety, certainly the benefit of the doubt. Let me just ride with that, because Donald Trump was offering that. And I think the words of Donald Trump echoing over and over and over throughout his first term did turn just enough of those white women off to where they said, let me vote for Joe Biden this time. But it was still a lot of resistance, because he didn't landslide in metro areas. Joe Biden didn't land. He just did better than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. But I would argue not by much. Good morning, Lisa Miller. And so if we're ever going to crack this nut of the grip that white supremacy has on this nation, then we have to talk about the roles that are played by each culture and each group in it. But it's also a part of white supremacy that says one election you can vote for the fascists, then you don't like how they're fascisting. Like, if that's even a word, like, oh, Donald Trump, he's going to protect me and my job and my community. And the thing he said about not allowing low-income housing in the suburbs, if that wasn't a dog whistle, I mean, that was a regular whistle. That wasn't a dog whistle. He's going to stop low-income housing from destroying the suburbs. You know exactly what that is. That means that Donald Trump didn't want poor white people to live amongst rich white people. Oh, you thought there was race involved in that? Donald Trump hates poor white people as much as he hates Mexicans. I would argue the reasons why poor white people have voted and support Donald Trump are the reasons why they're going to remain poor. Because it's not like they benefited. If you were poor and white and had all of the social ills in America that come with being poor, take the white part out of it, but just being poor, I would ask you, and maybe this is a rhetorical question, how has Donald Trump made your life better? He's made you feel better about being white, but you're still probably unemployed or underemployed like you were in 2016. And these are honest conversations that we need to have with some of our newfound allies that got sick and tired of Donald Trump, and maybe they didn't vote, or maybe they decided to vote for Joe Biden. We have to begin to dismantle the system and the structure that exists that gave Donald Trump 72 or 73, maybe 74 million votes in the first place, because that's the problem. They're not going away. They're not changing their minds. They had a rally in Washington, D.C., the Million MAGA March, where, I don't know, 170 people showed up, maybe. There's something that And I don't even know if there's anything that can be done about them. But if you are living in a space where you are politically and socially supporting something completely out of your best interest, then who are we to tell them that they need to change their political affiliations? I don't know if we can do it. Who knows? This one is from VOA News. Coronavirus infections in the United States surged to another single day record on Friday, surpassing 180,000 for the first time, according to Johns Hopkins University. The university reported 184,514 new cases in the United States, a 20% increase from the 153,496 cases on Thursday, raising the total to more than 10.8 million. What do we say, guys? Where do the numbers have to get? Maybe they have to hit a magical number of like 3,000 deaths per day to where people say, oh, well, maybe we should consider what our options are to stop the spread of this, because social distancing, the whole thing was 6 feet was just almost like an arbitrary number, because it's more like 12 to 18 feet of social distancing that we need, but 6 feet is more manageable. You can still spread the coronavirus from 6 feet. That's the other thing. From Fox 5, Dr. Anthony Fauci cautioned that Americans should expect a gradual return to normal after the coronavirus pandemic, as Pfizer potentially rolls out its highly effective vaccine at the end of the year. Speaking with Jake Tapper on Sunday morning's State of the Union, Fauci speculated that it might not be until the second or third quarter of 2021 that Americans might expect to start approaching a degree of normal. This is assuming that people get vaccinated. So keep pushing that date of normal out 1 quarter at a time for every, 5 or 10% of people that refuse to get vaccinated. So we'll just continue to push it out. What ultimately could happen, because there could be a silver lining in all of this politically and electorally, it shouldn't be one, but there could be one, if people that believe in science and facts refuse to get the vaccine because they think that Trump created the vaccine, the coronavirus could still be a winning political issue for Democrats in 2022 and in the 2024 presidential election if people just refuse, considering how many people are even going to be left then, because it's not like the growth and spread of the coronavirus can't be exponential. And some of y'all are going to get together for the holidays. You haven't seen your family all year. And even though they're warning against it, you're supposed to do a Zoom giving, thanks Zooming, where you get your family together and you go on Zoom and you all eat turkey and you spill gravy on your keyboard because you're also getting drunk and whatever. People are not going to do that. Some people who haven't seen their families all year believe that they have been in this isolated social prison long enough, and they're going to travel across country and they're going to see their families. And one person in that household at that Thanksgiving celebration touching all the food, and I see what y'all do with the mashed potatoes. You dip your fork in the mashed potatoes and you eat them, and the green bean casserole, which don't really understand why green bean casserole is so popular at some Thanksgivings. It's not very good. And then you're going to spread the Rona, and then everyone's going to go back to their homes after the Thanksgiving. After they're going to go back on airplanes, or they're going to drive to their cities and their towns. So expect another surge after that. Because one thing that I've learned, you can't keep people away from one another, even when we are advised to do so to save the lives of those people. You can't stop people from seeing one another. They just don't listen. So we'll see. And I think it's largely on us how long we want to keep this going at this rate. We have the opportunity. It's right here. All the science and medicine and technology and the billions and billions of dollars that pharmaceutical firms have made off of us by ripping us off for prescription drugs. Sometimes all of the money that they make can go into research and development so they can create something that can stop the spread of a pandemic. So it's almost like this horrible catch-22. We have been dramatically overcharged for medicines, mostly because we can't get together with Democrats and Republicans and really do something about the cost of prescription drugs, but Canada can. That's a whole nother thing. But when they take some of the money that they have made off of us by ripping us off and putting some people into financial dire straits and complete bankruptcy, because people, even with the Affordable Care Act, sometimes can't afford their prescription drugs, all of the money that was made, some of it can go into research and development so we can have a vaccine that can be for free. I don't necessarily like how that economic paradigm shakes out, but ultimately, if it can save the future of this country, maybe on some small level, it could have been worth it. I have an interesting one here from the Pew Research Center, and I'm also going to post this one in the Forum Facebook group, talking about America's political divide and how even on issues that should be of complete common sense, the divide exists amongst those that affiliate with Democrats and versus Republicans. And it's so bad that it's not sustainable. And if we are going to be voting for people that are in what we believe are our own best interests, our own political interests, that we're going to send people to legislatures or we're going to send people to different positions in government that will never see eye to eye with the opposite political party. And I mean, where it is right now, it's almost like never. Like, I don't know where, as an example, here in Wisconsin, where we've got heavily gerrymandered legislative districts, and the Republicans and they just won across the board in our most recent election, the Republicans in the state Senate and the state assembly. Where is common ground in which they can work with the governor if we can't see eye to eye on mitigating the spread of a pandemic that is killing Wisconsinites? And so what we're going to do is we're going to stay in our own political boxes, and we're going to continue to send people to elected office on the campaign promise that they will not work with the other party, even though we need them to work with the other party to get any kind of political normalcy back in the land. In his first speech as president-elect, Joe Biden made clear his intention to bridge the deep and bitter divisions in American society. He pledged to look beyond red and blue, to discard the harsh rhetoric that characterizes our political debates. It will be a difficult struggle. Americans have rarely been as polarized as they are today. Studies that have been conducted by the Pew Research Center over the past few years illustrate the increasingly stark disagreements between Democrats and Republicans on the economy, racial justice, climate change, law enforcement, international engagement, and a long list of other issues. The 2020 presidential election further highlighted these deep-seated divides. Supporters of Joe Biden and Donald Trump believe the differences between them are about more than just politics and policies. A month before the election, roughly 8 in 10 registered voters in both camps said their differences were incredibly deep-seated, almost to the point of no compromise. Trump believed the differences between them are about more than just politics and policies. 8 in 10 registered voters in both camps say their differences with the other side were more about core American values in which there will be very little compromise. Again, in both camps, they're worried that a victory by the other side would lead to, and I quote, lasting harm to the United States. 8 in 10 Republicans believe that the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will lead to lasting harm in the United States. And if they maintain that mode of thinking, all 71, 72, 73 million of those people that voted for Donald Trump, they are not likely to vote for Democrats that want to be on the side of getting the economy back on track and bringing this country back together and promoting a coronavirus vaccine so we all don't die. This is a deadly situation we find ourselves in as a nation. The U.S. is hardly the only country wrestling with deepening political fissures. I'm talking about Europe in this part of the article, and I really don't care. We've gotten enough from Europe. The 2020 pandemic has revealed how pervasive the divide in American politics is relative to other nations. Over the summer, 76% of Republicans, including independents who lean Republican, felt the U.S. had done a good job dealing with the coronavirus outbreak, compared with just 29% of those who do not identify with the Republican Party. This 47 percentage point gap was the largest gap found between those who supported the governing party and those who do not across the 14 nations that were surveyed. Moreover, 77% of Americans said the country was now more divided than before the outbreak, as compared with a median of 47% in the 13 other countries surveyed. Much of this American exceptionalism preceded the coronavirus. In Pew Research Center's study conducted before the pandemic, Americans were more ideologically divided than any of the 19 other publics surveyed when asked how much trust they have in scientists and whether scientists make decisions solely based on facts. These fissures have pervaded nearly every aspect of the American public and policy response to the crisis over the course of the year. Democrats and Republicans differ over mask wearing, contact tracing, how well public officials are dealing with the crisis, whether to get a vaccine once it's available, and whether life will remain changed in a major way after the pandemic. For Biden supporters, the coronavirus outbreak was a central issue in the election. In an October poll, 82% says it was very important to their votes. Among Trump supporters, it was easily the least significant among 6 issues tested on the survey. Just 24% of Republicans and Trump supporters said the coronavirus was very important. So they rated 5 other issues more important than the coronavirus. But 82% of Democrats, or those that voted for Joe Biden, said it was the number one issue when they decided to vote. How on earth do we move forward with a situation like that? Don't know, not sure. What else we got here? Here we go. Here's a bit of good news for those of you that believe it. Biotech company Moderna said today that analysis from its phase 3 trials show its COVID-19 vaccine is 94.5% effective at preventing the infection, offering hope for a second breakthrough in as many weeks. The news comes after a pharmaceutical giant, Pfizer, said earlier analysis showed the vaccine candidate was more than 90% effective. And so the 3 trials and the phases of trials, if I can paraphrase them, and I'm jogging my memory with this, is you take a small group of people, volunteers for the most part, or maybe they got paid, and you administer a formula of the vaccine that was created by injecting it to animals, right? And you see how the vaccine can work in a subsection of animals that have a reasonably similar genetic makeup to human beings. And then you infect those animals with the vaccine. Then you give some of the animals either a placebo or you don't vaccinate them at all, and you measure the differences. And then you also watch those animals to see which of them develop, tumors in their little animal faces and other dangerous side effects. And then you play around with different formulas and adjustments to the vaccine, and you continue with these trials on animals. And then you begin to see a particular formula that prevented the spread of the coronavirus, which is what we're testing for, what we're experimenting for. And then as they continue to follow the health and well-being of these animals, probably rats or mice, and they don't get sick. Their appetites are, back to normal. They're building muscle mass. Everything is fine. There's no reduced, any kind of physical functionality. And then you take that formula that had the least side effects, quite honestly, none at all, in these lab animals. And then you try it in a small number of humans. That's phase 2. And you watch those humans very, very closely. Now, do we have 5 years of data on those first original human beings that got that first, incarnation of the coronavirus? We do not, but you follow them. You check their blood pressure, you check their other metabolic functions, and if they're okay, then you get a larger section of people, maybe 10,000, maybe 15,000 volunteers that are willing to take this experimental vaccine, and then you watch them. But in that larger section of clinical trials, you have people that have other pre-existing conditions, people that may have heart disease or diabetes and other things that exist in the population of Americans, and you watch these people very, very closely. You're monitoring their health all of the time, and as more time goes on, and you see that this larger section of clinical trials is phase 3 section of human beings are not getting sick, and they're showing a substantial resistance to the coronavirus, 93, 94, 94.5% resistance to the coronavirus. You are ready to roll it out to everybody else. Could there be side effects 50 years later? Maybe could the side effects or whatever illnesses that people get many, many years later be caused by a variety of other things in the environment? Could be. In the city of Milwaukee, if you live in a house that was built before 1955, you probably have lead in your water. Just an example of some of the health risks that we live with, that we have just either tolerated or surrendered, or we just said, well, we're just going to put filters, on our water faucets in our homes. But we already have a number of environmental factors that can cause us to get sick. We already live with them. If you live in a central city or a predominantly minority neighborhood, we know that the air quality is probably worse. We know that some of the industrial factories and all of the waste they left in the soil still contains lead. If you live in older homes in the city of Milwaukee, as an example, your children and you are probably still getting exposed to lead and lead paint. We live with all of those things, all of these other poisonous environmental factors. I'm not saying that we should, I'm saying that we do. But we're concerned about the potential risks in a vaccine that is designed to save our lives. Who knows? Maybe we'll get it together one day. I hope we do. Thank you guys for joining me. Appreciate it. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel if you go to the Forum 2 on YouTube. Hit subscribe and you can be notified of new videos and other rants that I may post on the old internet. You guys have yourselves a wonderful day. Wear your mask, get the vaccine. And then if you're still alive, I'll see you tomorrow.